Every man who acts tough is secretly weak, and everyone around him knows it. The louder he tries to prove his strength, the more he exposes the cracks in his armor. You've seen this man before. Puffed up chest, raised voice, eyes searching for validation. He believes his performance intimidates others, but in truth, it reveals his insecurity like blood in the water dot. And here's the part that most men never realize. Acting tough doesn't make you feared. It makes you predictable. It tells the world exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to provoke you, and exactly where your pride becomes your leash. That's why so many men who posture end up being controlled, mocked, or quietly dismissed. But here's the hidden truth Machiavelli understood centuries ago. True power doesn't scream, it whispers. Real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It radiates. A man who controls himself, who knows when to strike and when to stay silent, terrifies far more than the man who flexes in every room. And yet, the tragedy is this. Most men will never discover this lesson. They'll spend their lives chasing respect by acting hard, while their power slips away. In this video, we're going to dismantle the myth of toughness, expose why acting strong is the surest sign of weakness, and reveal Machiavelli's brutal principles for building genuine strength. Stay with me, because once you see the truth, you'll never look at tough guys the same way again. From the time we were boys, we were sold a story that to be respected, you must act tough. The message comes from everywhere: movies, music, even the locker room. The real man, we're told, is the one who never backs down, who answers every insult with aggression, who wears his toughness like armor. Hollywood has made billions selling this image. The lone wolf who beats his chest, the gangster who controls the room through intimidation, the action hero who solves every problem with fists. It's no surprise then that men grow up thinking that projecting toughness is the fastest route to respect, safety, and even admiration from women. They think if they walk with enough swagger, speak with enough harshness, and never show vulnerability, the world will bow to them. It feels logical on the surface. Appear strong and you will be strong. But here's the problem. It's all an illusion. What men mistake for strength is often just a desperate performance. True strength is invisible. It doesn't have to parade itself. Yet the myth of toughness convinces countless men to wear a mask, to live in a constant state of performance, hoping no one notices the fear behind the act. Contrast this with how influence actually works. People don't follow the loudest man in the room. They follow the one who makes them feel uncertain, curious, or even a little afraid, without him having to raise his voice. Bravado wins attention, but composure wins loyalty. Intimidation may silence people for a moment, but true influence makes them adjust their behavior, even when you're not present. The tragedy is this. Society has convinced men that the mask of toughness is their shield, when in reality, it's their cage. And the longer they cling to it, the further they drift from that kind of strength that can't be faked and can't be broken. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something that almost every tough guy today completely misses. Appearances matter, but only when they are crafted with strategy, not desperation. In The Prince, Machiavelli warns rulers that it is far better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. But here's the part most men overlook. He never said to act feared. He said to be feared, and to cultivate that perception with precision. The difference is everything. The ruler who constantly flaunts his power, who lashes out at every insult, who spends his energy proving himself, that ruler is weak. His insecurity bleeds through every action, and his enemies learn how to manipulate him. A single whisper against his pride can send him into reckless action. In contrast, the ruler who holds back, who maintains composure, and who chooses when to reveal his strength terrifies far more. Because no one quite knows the limits of his power, this principle applies directly to men today. When you act tough in everyday life, you're telegraphing insecurity. You're telling the world, I don't believe I'm respected, so I have to perform respectability. Machiavelli would laugh at such a display. He knew that power is not in the noise you make, but in the silence you control. Think of two men in a confrontation. One is loud, throwing insults, puffing up his chest. The other remains calm, measured, almost unreadable. Which one do you respect more? Which one unsettles you more? The calm man radiates something the aggressive man cannot. mastery over himself. And as Machiavelli understood, a man who masters himself can master others. Real control commands respect. Fake aggression signals insecurity. This is why Machiavelli emphasized perception management, not performance. Appearances should be cultivated like a weapon strategically, selectively, never wasted. The man who needs to constantly prove his toughness has already lost. The man who doesn't need to prove it is the one who quietly rules the room. Machiavelli's reality is clear. Toughness is not a performance, it is a perception. And if you spend your energy acting tough, you've already revealed that you don't possess the very strength you're trying to project. Greatest flaw in fake toughness is not just that it fails, it actively destroys the man who uses it. On the surface, it might look convincing. The raised voice, the rigid posture, the glare that's meant to scare. But beneath the performance lies fragility. And the more a man relies on this mask, the more predictable, vulnerable, and weak he becomes. Think about it. A man who acts tough is the easiest man in the world to control. Why? Because all you need to do is challenge his image. Insult him in front of others, and he feels compelled to lash out. Question his authority, and he scrambles to prove himself. He becomes a puppet, his strings pulled by anyone who knows how to poke his pride. The tougher he tries to look, the easier he is to break. Imagine him at work. A colleague disagrees with him in a meeting. Instead of responding with calm authority, he raises his voice, tries to bulldoze through. Everyone in the room sees it for what it is, not confidence, but insecurity exposed under pressure. His influence drops instantly. Or in relationships, he thinks that acting dominant, jealous outbursts, possessive behavior, constant need to assert control makes him respected. But to his partner, it signals immaturity, fragility, and fear. Rather than inspiring loyalty, he invites resistance, manipulation, and eventual contempt, even in conflict. The tough guy who throws the first punch, who can't walk away, is the man who ends up losing the most, whether it's his freedom, his reputation, or his control. Real strength is measured in what you don't respond to. Fake strength reacts to everything. Machiavelli would have seen this as the perfect example of poor statecraft. The ruler who reacts to every slight, every rumor, every threat with open aggression burns himself out, wastes resources, and reveals his weakness to friend and enemy alike. The wise ruler, however, allows insults to pass, pretends not to hear them, and then strikes only when the timing benefits him. This is the difference between strength that endures and toughness that collapses. The hidden danger of acting tough is that it enslaves you. You live at the mercy of appearances. You're not in control of your actions, your critics are. They press your buttons, and you respond exactly how they want. And nothing is easier to defeat than a man who telegraphs his every move. That is why the man who postures as strong will always remain weak. And the man who refuses to posture, who cultivates control, will always hold the real power. Fake toughness has never been more visible than it is today. In fact, our culture rewards men for putting it on display. Scroll through Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, and you'll see endless parades of men flexing in rented cars, flashing stacks of cash they don't own, or shouting at the camera about how alpha they are. The louder the display, the more desperate the man behind it. It's not strength, it's theater. And the audience can always sense the act. In the streets, the same pattern shows up. Young men bark at each other in public, puffing up their chests, trying to prove who's dominant. But look closer, and you'll see fear in their eyes. They aren't in control, they're terrified of losing face. This is not power. It's panic disguised as bravado. And everyone who has real experience knows it. Dating culture is no different. Many men believe that by acting hyper-aggressive or overly dominant, they'll win respect from women. But what they actually create is the opposite effect: resentment, manipulation, or disinterest. Women may play along for a while, but they sense insecurity faster than anyone. A man who's secure doesn't need to constantly prove himself. A man who acts tough only reveals how fragile he really is. Contrast this with the men who truly dominate in silence. The businessman who never brags, but whose results speak for themselves. The leader who doesn't raise his voice, but whose presence commands attention the moment he walks into the room. The man who doesn't need to prove he's strong, because his composure, his achievements, and his control make it obvious. In today's world, fake toughness is everywhere, and it fools no one. Real strength, however, is rare, and that is exactly why it is so powerful. If fake toughness is so obviously weak, then why do so many men still fall into the trap? The answer is simple: insecurity, conditioning, and a lifetime of bad examples. From boyhood, men are told that vulnerability equals weakness. Fathers rarely teach emotional control. Schools don't teach resilience. Society doesn't teach the difference between composure and bravado. Instead, boys grow up with Hollywood heroes who win battles by flexing muscles and throwing punches. The quiet strategist, the one who holds back, who calculates, rarely gets screen time. And so the myth passes from generation to generation. If you want respect, act tough. Peer pressure only amplifies the lie. In schoolyards, in locker rooms, even in friend groups, the boy who doesn't posture is mocked. The boy who does gets attention, even if it's fake respect. That conditioning follows men into adulthood. They carry the belief that to survive, they must always perform toughness. But here's the devastating consequence. The tougher a man acts, the more he becomes a pawn in other people's games. He doesn't lead, he reacts. At work, he's baited into outbursts that ruin his reputation. In relationships, he confuses control with strength, only to end up resented and replaced. In friendships, he surrounds himself with shallow approval, never realizing he's respected only for his performance, not his substance. This is the trap. Men believe they are earning respect, but they are only digging a deeper hole of insecurity. They spend years building an identity around fake toughness, while true strength, calmness, strategy, mastery remains forever out of reach. And by the time many realize it, they've already lost the power they could have had. If fake toughness enslaves men, then what is the alternative? Machiavelli gives us the blueprint. Real power is not in constant display, but in strategic restraint, perception management, and inner mastery. Strength that must be announced is no strength at all. Strength that needs no announcement is uncheckable. The first step is strategic restraint. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must learn when to act and when to wait. Power is conserved by choosing battles wisely, not by fighting every one. For men today, this means resisting the urge to react to every insult, every challenge, every provocation. When you stay composed while others lose control, you project an authority that cannot be faked. Silence at the right moment is louder than shouting. The second step is mastering perception. A man doesn't need to constantly assert toughness. He needs to cultivate an image of quiet control. This doesn't mean weakness, it means unpredictability. When people cannot easily read your limits, they assume you're stronger than you are. Machiavelli understood this. Fear is not built on noise, but on uncertainty. Third, cultivate inner strength. This is the part men try to skip, which is why they fall back on acting tough. But real power comes from self-discipline, controlling your emotions, training your body, sharpening your mind, and aligning your actions with purpose. A man who cannot control himself will never control others. A man who has mastered himself radiates an energy that no performance can replicate. Finally, learn to choose when to be feared. Machiavelli warned against cruelty for its own sake. Instead, he advised using fear sparingly, at decisive moments, to establish authority. Applied today, this means knowing when to enforce boundaries, when to say no, when to walk away without apology. A man who tries to be feared at all times becomes hated. A man who can be merciful most of the time, yet terrifying when pushed, is remembered forever. The mindset shift is simple but profound. Stop trying to act strong. Start building the kind of strength that doesn't need acting. Replace the performance with substance. Replace the mask with mastery. Every man has two choices: live as an actor in someone else's play, or become the director of his own. Machiavelli's path is not about pretending, it is about becoming. True power is calm, deliberate, and often invisible, until the moment it decides to reveal itself. That is the power no one can fake, and the power every man must seek.